public outing since 2010, and Japanese nationalists sail to waters near the Diaoyu Islands.
Good evening. The Legislative Council is set to discuss tomorrow the government's proposal to donate $100 million to the victims of the Sichuan earthquake. Some lawmakers have opposed the plan, fearing the money will end up in the hands of corrupt mainland officials. But as Evelina Leung reports, the chief executive reassured them that his administration will monitor how the funds will be used.
The government's proposal to donate $100 million to Sichuan earthquake victims has met with resistance from some legislators. Some fear part of the donation, which will be given directly to the authorities in Sichuan, will fall into the hands of corrupt officials. Today, Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying reassured taxpayers that his government will keep a close eye on how the funds will be used. Chief Secretary for Administration Carrie Lam doubts Hong Kong can make special requests on how the donation should be used. But she pointed out that mainland officials have to clearly state how they use the money. Lam also said careful steps are being taken to ensure non-government organizations will use the donation properly.
We have already met with most of the NGOs which have been applying for funds from the Disaster Relief Fund in the past yesterday. And so they also indicated that they are preparing their proposal and they will come back to apply for funds to do more emergency relief in Sichuan province.
Opposition towards the government's donation plan came after mainland authorities were found to have misused funds donated by Hong Kong to help the victims of another massive earthquake in Sichuan 5 years ago. Among the reconstruction projects sponsored by the SAR was a school in Mianyang. The school, built at a cost of 2 million Hong Kong dollars, was torn down a year later to make way for a shopping mall and a luxurious housing estate. Many lawmakers fear this will happen again.
People are furious. They feel that the mainland doesn't lack money. They lack a clean and acceptable system. But of course, we cannot set up this system in days or months or even years. So some people say maybe as a compromise, we can still donate the money, but it should go to reputable NGOs who have undertaken such relief work in the past and who have a very solid track record of not pocketing the money.
The LegCo's Finance Committee will hold a special meeting tomorrow to discuss this proposal. Meanwhile, local charities reviewed today many Hong Kong people have made donations to the quake victims, including cash and other relief items such as food, tents and medication. Some charities deliver the donations directly to Sichuan residents to ensure the items won't be misused, while others say they will conduct random checks among Sichuan victims to ensure they receive the donations. Evelina Leung, TVB News.
Well, it's now more than 3 days since the deadly Sichuan earthquake, and although the golden 72 hours for finding survivors are now up, rescuers are still working frantically in dangerous conditions. Authorities say 193 people have been killed so far and over 12,000 injured. Etienne Lammy-Smith reports.
This is what rescuers are facing as they try to get to the worst affected areas. Air Force helicopters from the Chengdu military region were drafted to deliver over a ton of food and provisions to victims of Saturday's quake. With many roads still almost unusable, military aircraft are airlifting the injured to safety. The main road linking Lushan and Baoxing counties had been cleared, but multiple landslides blocked it once more. Locals say several cars were buried. Bulldozers, explosives. Rescuers are trying everything to get through. Even for elderly survivors, it's a mad dash to avoid constantly falling boulders. This soldier was struck on the head by a rock, a reminder of the danger rescuers are facing. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon offered his condolences to the victims of the quake.
I extend my condolences to all those who were affected. I sincerely hope that the injured will recover quickly. The people of China have shown great resilience and solidarity. The United Nations stands with them. We are prepared to provide relief and mobilize international support to help with the recovery.
Japan and other countries have also offered aid to China, but the Ministry of Foreign Affairs turned them down, saying China can handle the fallout on its own. A reminder of aid given in the past, this school in Lushan. Badly damaged in the 2008 earthquake, it was rebuilt in 2011 after a 31 million renminbi donation by the Hong Kong government. On the outside, it doesn't look too bad, but the damage inside the classrooms is extensive and the walls have taken a beating. A Hong Kong engineer who studied the damage from photographs says it looks as though the structural walls are intact and the school can be rebuilt again. And over at the Bifengxia Giant Panda Reserve, footage has emerged of a frightened giant panda trying to climb a tree, unsuccessfully, to escape the quake. There are 61 pandas in the reserve, all of which are safe and sound. Etienne Smith, TVB News.
The wife of jailed mainland Nobel Peace Laureate Liu Xiaobo today left her home for the first time since her house arrest in 2010. Liu Xia attended her younger brother's trial, which she insists is politically motivated. It's her first public outing in 2.5 years. Liu Xia was given permission to observe her younger brother's trial in Beijing's Huairou courthouse. I'm mentally and physically exhausted because my brother means the world to me. She was initially hesitant to say much to the press, apologetically explaining that her elder brother had negotiated and vouched for her brief release. But she gave a definitive yes when asked if she thought her younger brother's case was related to her own situation. Liu Xia said authorities were trying to break her legs one after another, but insisted that she will continue to stand her ground. She was allowed to meet her family at a restaurant, saying she hopes her own case can be heard in court, why she's guilty of being Liu Xiaobo's wife. Liu Xia has been placed under house arrest since 2010 after her husband, jailed for subversion, was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. She added that she had no freedom and was pessimistic about her husband's release. Outside the courthouse, Liu yelled out of her car, "Tell them I'm not free," as she was being driven out. Her younger brother, Liu Hui, is facing fraud charges in a real estate dispute involving 3 million renminbi. He could be jailed for a maximum of 14 years if convicted. His lawyer said he had pleaded not guilty and that prosecution lacked sufficient evidence. There's no word yet on when a verdict will be handed down. Diplomats from the US and British embassies in Beijing were among those trying to observe today's trial but were refused entry. Relations between China and Japan took a turn for the worse today over a visit by Japanese lawmakers to a controversial war shrine and a confrontation near the Diaoyu Islands. Jameson Wong has more.
Beijing calls this illegal and troublemaking. In another incident undermining Sino-Japanese ties, a Japanese flotilla carrying more than 80 nationalist activists sailed to waters near the disputed Diaoyu Islands this morning. The group's leaders said they were there to assert what he called Japanese ownership of the islands, known to them as the Senkakus. The boats were shadowed by at least 10 Japanese Coast Guard vessels. 8 Chinese marine surveillance vessels also moved near the islands to monitor the Japanese boats. The State Oceanic Administration says the Chinese fleet succeeded in driving the Japanese boats out of the area. Tokyo, for its part, protested against what it calls an intrusion by the Chinese vessels into its waters near the islands. This afternoon, a foreign ministry spokeswoman slammed the voyage by the Japanese activists and said Beijing had lodged stern representations with Tokyo. The controversy has taken a turn for the worse since a move by Japan last year to nationalize 3 of the 5 islands in the disputed chain. And in an episode described as harming mutual trust between Tokyo and its neighbors, 168 Japanese lawmakers visited the Yasukuni Shrine this morning. They included members of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party and the opposition Democratic Party of Japan. It was the largest such delegation paying homage there in 8 years. Today's pilgrimage came after Prime Minister Shinzo Abe made an offering, and Deputy Prime Minister Taro Aso and 2 other ministers visited the shrine to mark its spring festival. The Yasukuni Shrine honors the country's war dead, including convicted war criminals in the Second World War. In response, Beijing has asked Tokyo to reflect on its wartime aggression and respect the feelings of peoples of victimized countries. The latest visits to the shrine by Japanese politicians also stoked anger in South Korea. A group of activists today staged an anti-Japan rally in Seoul. Jameson Wong, TVB News.
Police in Canada have arrested 2 men in connection with a plot to derail a Toronto area train. Authorities say the men were being backed by Al-Qaeda elements in Iran. Alan Buckner reports.
The Royal Canadian Mounted Police say it's the first known Al-Qaeda-backed plot on Canadian soil. They say tips from the Muslim community led to a more than half-year-long investigation that culminated in yesterday's arrests.
Had this plot been carried out, it would have resulted in innocent people being killed or seriously injured. While the RCMP believed the accused had the capacity and intent to carry out these criminal acts, there was no imminent threat to the general public, rail employees, train passengers, or infrastructure.
Militia didn't go into details of the planned attack. Police in the U.S. say the target was a Via Rail train running between Toronto and New York. RCMP say the men had direction from Al-Qaeda elements in Iran, but there was no reason to think the planned attacks were state-sponsored. Under arrest is 30-year-old Shihab Essegire, seen here deboarding a plane in Toronto following his arrest in Montreal, where he was a doctoral student. Also arrested was 35-year-old Raid Jasser of Toronto. They're charged with conspiring to attack and murder in association with a terror group. Neither is a Canadian citizen, but police didn't release their nationalities. Police in the U.S. said there's no connection between this plot and last week's Boston Marathon bombings. Alan Buckner, TVB News.
And still to come in the news. HIT on the offensive again by taking out newspaper ads. Recruitment for participants on a one-way trip to Mars. And an unprecedented 20th league title for Manchester United.